So we're here with Svein Rasmussen and Margareta, and we're here at Starboard headquarters, right on Lake Vong Taco. You can see that out there. Pretty nice setup you got in here. I'm jealous. I'm from Hawaii and I'm jealous. So tell us, how did you get started in, this whole Starboard? How'd you start the company? How'd you come up with this idea?
Well, I guess it gets back to '76 when I first stood up on a board, and I kind of got caught by just the idea of being on the water and standing up on it. And in the beginning, of course, there was only a rig to hold on to, and held on to that for about 30 years, I guess. And I kept on being an addict, and then I guess I came here to Thailand somewhere in the mid-90s. I had been on the pro tour windsurfing for about 15 years, and Thailand was a nice place. I just kind of hung out there for the last 15 years. And 8-9 years ago, my father and my mother were spending quite some time here at Puntako, and one day I saw him paddling forth and back on the lake. I'd never seen anything like this before. He had like a, big long paddle, and he was out on one of our boards, our windsurfing boards. So he was then the first stand-up paddler I've ever seen or heard of, and that was nice. And then some years later we saw these fantastic photos of Ed Hamilton, doing his great wave riding, and then my first idea was to see how I could, because obviously I was born as a windsurfer, and I would like to see how can it be some coordinations and combinations here. So the first idea was to make some more, let's call it wave-oriented longboards for windsurfing. And after a while, we just threw the rig away and were surfing them, and I started to paddle them. So that was sort of my avenue to explore stand-up paddleboarding. And then the truth is that I kind of completely got mad about that. So now you have the little river behind us here, the lake out there, and we go to these, the Balis and the Maldives that are around the corner. So we kind of just glided into it without any planning. It was just like a course that found itself.
So you guys are the largest windsurf company in the world.
Yeah. I think we've been leading for 7 years now.
Right.
So we've been.
And you've been in business for how long?
For 14.
14. Okay. Yes. And then stand-up looks to be a big part of your company in the near future, right?
Yeah. Of course, everything starts at very little, but I believe that already in 3 to 4 years, the SUP division will be larger than the windsurfing division. And further, my estimation, which doesn't mean anything, it's just my dream, is that in 10 years, paddleboarding, stand-up paddleboarding, is probably the most popular water sport on the planet Earth. I can only see kayaking, canoeing, kind of being a serious contender. And most of the guys that are sitting down, I would like to stand up in the future. And what is exciting is all the avenues of stand-up paddleboarding. Anything from like slick stand-up kayaks to like pipeline to mushy Japanese European conditions. I see, of course, kiteboarding SUPing in the future, and windsurfing SUPing is all these avenues that's going to encompass all the ones we haven't thought of yet. So it's probably the most incredible thing we've ever seen. On the other hand, most of these boards look like what windsurfing boards look like 40 years ago, because they were just oversized surfboards. So it's like this 40-year-old cycle that suddenly hit us, and that's probably the most exciting thing to see how things come and go, and they get explored, they get trendy, and they fade. Whereas I think stand-up paddleboarding will not be fading; that will just be growing, because it's something that is so easy to transport, so inexpensive to actually use and buy, and so accessible for everybody. So to me, it's like I feel this is something that most people really should taste.
That's a pretty strong statement, considering that you're primarily a windsurfing company.
Well, as I started to say, I fell in love with standing on top of a board. If the propulsion is a rig or a paddle, it doesn't really matter. It's just the feeling of gliding over water that caught me. I remember the first time I put up my rig and I kind of started to move forward. what I did, I looked backward, I just looked at the bubbles behind the board as you went forward, and that was like incredible to see you actually were gliding on the water, and that's what matters really to me. And then when you get the next step of actually being able to also go down the surface of a wave, it's like then everything becomes just completely like a dream. So that's like the big bonus when you have conditions like that. And the same thing for windsurfing. You have a rig there instead of the paddles. These two things are very similar for us, and they go hand in hand. All our pro teams are all onto pro team windsurfers are all onto paddleboarding, and you probably see our pro paddleboarding team also getting onto rigs. It's the same family pretty much.
Do you see a crossover between windsurfing and stand-up paddling? So even people that are doing stand-up paddling might want to do windsurfing now?
Yeah. I mean, I think that we probably are the #1 brand worldwide in stand-up paddle, because 80% of the boards we sell also have a mast track. So people think that maybe one time in the future they would like to put a rig on it, because obviously already we want to stand up. And if it's 10 knots, it's a little bit hard work to paddle against the wind, so why not just put a rig on it, and then it's effortless, you just keep on gliding. So it's like hand in hand. Of course, people will argue that something is cooler than something else and blah blah blah, but the reality is that we are enjoying standing on top of the water.
So over here at Bong Taco, the cable park lake, explain how you're doing, how your R&D process works, because it's pretty cool.
Well, it's like what we found is the more development steps one can do in a shorter time, the better result you can get. Every year one expects kit to get better and better. So it's a matter of how many steps can one do in 1 year. So what we start with is to shape up some boards, and then in the morning we go on the cable at very low speed just to feel how the board is turning. And for lunch we go back and reshape it, and for dinner we can test it again. So maybe we do 3-4 generations on the cable within 2 days, and then we go to the waves and see how they feel in the waves, and then we go back again. So normally you will say 2, 3, 4 steps maybe my cable, and then maybe you do 3, 4 more development steps based on feedback from the actual waves. So maybe you do 7, 8 steps normally, and we can do it pretty quick actually.
Plus you have your R&D and your prototype production right here, so that must take your development timeline down by a lot.
Yeah. It's like you can sit with the idea, and literally we just 10 minutes later we can start to make the groundwork for it. And in the afternoon you basically see the shape, and then within 3-4 days the board is ready. So we can be very efficient because of that.
So where do you see stand-up going in the near future? Because we've been doing a lot of distance runs now in Hawaii. Flat water touring seems to be coming up. Where are you seeing it?
Well, it's going to go like many other sports in different directions. Look at skiing. You have cross-country skiing, slalom, you go downhill, and then suddenly you have snowboarding, which is a type of skiing. It's going to go into all the different variations, and it's mainly depending on where you live. If, for instance, you go skiing on flat terrain, obviously you are cross-country skiing. And so if you are living at a lake, you will go on a stand-up kayak or a long stand-up paddleboard at Project Line. If you live like in Hawaii, you probably either go for some downwinders, we need some more rock winder boards and kind of not catching the next wave, or you go into the waves with wave boards, and maybe you are more like you like the longboarding style, maybe you like more the shortboarding style. So it will go in any direction. It's like wide open. It's depending on what people like to do, and then equipment will be made thereafter. But quite likely there are more places without waves than with waves. So the potential actually for the flat water is statistically quite a bit bigger than the surfing part of it.
How many boards in your line for 2009 for stand-up?
We would have for stand-up, we probably have something like 56 different models, I think.
56?
Yes, but that is broken down to technologies. I think we wouldn't have more than 15 shapes, I believe. So we just have different configurations.
And 3 different types of construction?
Yeah, we said 3.5.
Yeah, 3.5. So how do you figure a half then?
Well, we have developed a new type of deck grip that is very secret at the moment.
Oh, okay.
And so we have one model that sells with the normal EVA deck grip and one that sells with the new deck grip, which we call the Star Touch. So that's like 1.5 technology. And then we have our super light Technora sandwich construction, and we have the very nice and durable Sport Deck, which is basically the glossy wood look.